Perpetual's Impact Philanthropy Application Program, or IPAP, is Australia's largest open philanthropic grant round, with the trusts that we manage distributing over $120 million annually. The purpose of this webinar is to provide context around the Impact Program, insights from our most recent round, and guidance on how your organisation can submit a strong application. This webinar is available for you to access at any time. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of this nation. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which our company is located and where we conduct our business. We pay our respects to ancestors and elders past and present. Perpetual is committed to honouring Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's unique cultural and spiritual relationships to the land, waters and seas and their rich contribution to society. Before we delve into the Impact Philanthropy Application Program in more detail, I wanted to provide some context around Perpetual's philanthropy offering, as it's been a key part of our heritage and our business for almost as long as we've been in existence. Our very first charitable trust was established in 1897 and still exists today. Over the last 127 years, Perpetual's involvement in philanthropy has steadily grown and evolved, along with the needs and motivations of our clients. Over the last 10 years of our grants program, we've distributed over $1.2 billion to for-purpose organisations on behalf of our clients. On this slide, we've got some insights into our 2024 round. So as you can see, we received almost 1,800 applications last year, and it was an incredibly competitive process. One thing I'd also like to note here is that you can see that IPAP makes up $35 million of the total figure that's distributed into the for-purpose sector. The other almost 90 million is made up predominantly of donations to organisations who've been named as the beneficiary of a trust through that trust's establishment process. So that means that we don't have any discretion around who receives those funds. However, where Perpetual is sole trustee and does have a degree of discretion, we use IPAP to ensure that we're effectively honouring our clients' legacies by ensuring that their donations go to well-governed, sustainable organisations. So IPAP is effectively our due diligence process. Through IPAP, our clients grant to every area of the for-purpose sector. The areas of funding from our 2024 round, which you can see on this slide, are fairly consistent with the trends that we've seen over the last decade. In 2024, we saw a slight increase in funding for health, and funding for education dropped slightly in comparison with 2023. Geographic distribution of funding is strongly skewed to the eastern states because many of the trusts and foundations that we manage are based in New South Wales and Victoria. These states take the lion's share of philanthropic funding because of historical tax legislation that means that trusts of a certain vintage can only distribute in the state in which they're domiciled. However, in situations where Perpetual has discretion around the geography of distribution, we aim to support highly ranked organisations in a wider range of locations so that funding is geographically diversified. So let's get into how IPAP works in a bit more detail. IPAP is the framework through which we make recommendations to our clients within their areas of philanthropic intent. Applications that are strong and score well through this process are the ones that our clients see. We like to think of ourselves as project agnostic, so our process instead focuses on identifying organisations that are strategic, well-governed and impactful within their areas of work. We want to see a strong strategy which relates back to your organisational mission and effectiveness. We want to see that your leadership team is aware of the external environment in which your organisation operates. We want to see that you understand the impact of your work and that you're able to demonstrate this impact over the long term. And we want to be able to recommend organisations that are outcomes focused, giving us the confidence and our clients the confidence to support organisations that can demonstrate they're able to effectively, efficiently and sustainably deliver on their mission. Essentially, our assessment process focuses on the strength of your organisation rather than your project. On this slide, you can see how the IPAP process works from start to finish. So once applications close in December, we assess all applications, check eligibility, and ensure previous acquittals have been submitted. We then go through a rigorous matching process where we compile shortlists of high-scoring applications that align with the interests of specific trusts, as well as the strategic philanthropic intent of our clients and their interest areas and values. We present these shortlists to our living clients in formal meetings between March and May, and it's in these meetings that clients ultimately decide which organisations they're going to fund. Successful and unsuccessful applicants are notified in mid to late June, and distributions are made ahead of June 30 each year. As I've already mentioned, our process looks at organisational strategy, governance and impact, and applications are assessed on these pillars and given an aggregate score out of 5. If an application scores a 1 or 2 at this stage, we do not recommend it to our clients for funding. Scoring a 3 means we score an application as fair and are able to shortlist that application for clients. If an application scores a 4 or a 5, we deem it an excellent or outstanding application and highly recommend it to our clients for funding. As you can see by the graph on the right, the vast majority of our clients direct their funding to organisations that are recommended through the IPAP assessment process. So, what does a strong application look like and what do you need to do to prepare one? We use the first 2 accessible questions to determine how efficiently your organisation converts its resources, be it human resources, financial, in-kind, etc., into business outputs and ultimately to impact for the community that it serves. This is where you can demonstrate that you are striving for a sustainable business model. So we ask you first to list 3 to 5 KPIs that your organisation uses to measure efficient use of its resources, and then demonstrate how your organisation is performing against them in the second part of the question. In this question, we're looking for metrics, ratios and figures relating to how you're tracking against your identified KPIs. On this slide, we've shared some real examples from applications that have scored strongly in past application rounds. Efficiency KPIs are measured by comparing inputs in terms of resources and measurable outputs. Efficiency measures tend to be quite similar across not-for-profit organisations. Some examples include staff turnover rates, a reduction in cost of program delivery, number of complaints, fundraising return on investment, etc. Importantly, we're not assessing whether you're meeting or exceeding your KPIs here, but we are assessing that you understand what efficiency KPIs are and that you're using them to track the efficiency of your operations. The KPIs should also include targets or benchmarks to demonstrate how you're achieving them. For example, maintain staff retention rate at 75%. When you're telling us how you're tracking against your KPIs in question 1.9, we want to see the results against a target over time across multiple data points, so ideally year on year. The next accessible questions look at the effectiveness of your organisation. So we ask you to list 3 to 5 KPIs that your organisation uses to measure effective achievement of your mission and demonstrate how you're performing against them. Where efficiency KPIs tend to be similar across different not-for-profit organisations, effectiveness KPIs is where they diverge, as they're connected to your specific mission. This response should relate specifically back to your organisation's mission and strategy and should demonstrate how your board or leadership team measures how effective the organisation is at achieving strategic priorities and delivering on your defined mission. When responding to 1.10, again, we're looking for metrics, ratios and figures relating to how you're tracking against your identified KPIs. Ensure that you include measurable targets. Again, you don't have to be tracking positively. You might actually be tracking in a negative way. This doesn't impact your score. What's important is that you're aware of your KPIs and tracking them, and when you're telling us how you're tracking against them, we want to see results ideally across multiple data collection points, so again, year on year. Here we've again got some examples of responses to questions that have scored well in past applications, though I reiterate that these will vary from every organisation dependent on what your mission is. Some responses here might be around expansion of programs into new areas or with new partners that will help to deepen stakeholder engagement. It might be around client satisfaction or retention of stakeholders or number of participants that are reached by a program. Again, you'll see that we're not assessing content here, but the process. We fundamentally believe that an organisation that understands whether it's performing well or poorly against its own KPIs is an organisation that understands it may need to pivot on occasion, to make adjustments in order to be effective and efficient across different programs to best deliver impact to the community that it works with. Take care not to confuse the terms efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency KPIs indicate how efficiently an organisation is using its resources and are commonly comparing outputs with the inputs used to achieve them. Effectiveness KPIs indicate how well an organisation is succeeding at achieving its mission and help organisations to track their progress towards their mission and strategic priorities. In terms of working out where to find this information and the best person within your organisation to speak to, we have a number of additional resources on our website that provide some guidance on who to best speak to find this information, whether it's your CEO, your COO, or members of your board. The next question that we assess on your application form relates to external forces. So we ask you to list and summarise 3 to 5 external forces or trends that present challenges to your organisation. We initially ask you to provide a list of the key challenges or threats and then provide more detail in the section below. This question relates to an organisation's awareness of external environments, including public policy, government, other organisations working within the sector and the community. These are systemic environmental factors that your organisation can't control, but that you need to be aware of to be effectively governed and achieve long-term sustainability. For example, if you're an organisation working in the disability sector, the NDIS may be a major external factor facing your organisation. Also, housing affordability and it affecting homelessness, and of course the challenges of operating in a digital world. But if you're putting that forward as an external factor, please provide specificity. What we don't want to see here are responses around general funding or the competitiveness of the fundraising space as external factors. These issues affect the sector as a whole, and we know that it's an underlying challenge for all organisations who apply for funding through our process. We want to get a sense of whether or not your organisation understands the systemic issues specific to you. We then ask you to articulate your organisational internal risks. In this assessable question, we ask you to list the risks in the first section and then provide more detail in the section below. Risk is an important factor that our assessors look for when reviewing an organisation's governance. So we ask this question to understand how you might mitigate against internal risk and the strategies in place to manage against risks should they eventuate. It's a great opportunity to engage with your board on this question and ask them what red flags they've identified, perhaps in their risk register, and then to articulate the corresponding mitigation strategy. The purpose of your organisation will influence the risks that may affect you, but there are some common categories which can be considered. For example, financial fraud or underinsurance, legal or regulatory risk, operational risk, so disruption to services due to a system failure, brand or reputation risk, or key person risk. So for example, if your CEO is also your CFO and also your key fundraiser. What's important here is to be honest. Some organisations worry that if they admit they're facing huge risks, that will scare donors. However, the opposite occurs. And if you exclude risks that are significant, it looks like you aren't addressing them. Philanthropists understand that you're operating in a challenging environment. Let's now look at the outcomes section of the application form and where the process goes from there. Question 2.7 is the only question we assess that relates directly to the project or activity that you're proposing rather than your organisation as a whole. The logic behind this is that even though we say we're project agnostic, we know that organisations that are achieving their mission are laser focused when it comes to outcomes. In this two-part question, we ask you to share the expected outcomes of your proposed activity and articulate how you intend to measure them. We're looking for evidence of realistic, measurable and achievable goals and outcomes, including your project's impact on a societal level. Be careful not to confuse outcomes with outputs. An outcome is something that can be shown to have happened as a consequence of producing an output. An outcome tracks how your activities are moving the dial on the problem that you're trying to solve and tracks the impact that you're having on your end beneficiaries. One helpful way of approaching outcomes is using the SMART framework, outcomes that are specific, measurable, attributable, relevant, and time-bound. For example, if the funding is going to be used to conduct an activity to improve the health of asthma sufferers through the distribution of information brochures on asthma management, The number of brochures distributed is the output. This itself is not evidence of the outcome. The outcome is measured by whether the health of asthma sufferers has improved. The second part of the question is assessing whether you have a solid measurement and evaluation framework in place. Here, we're not assessing your methodology. It could be that your organisation has commissioned an external partner to do a longitudinal research study, or it could be that you conduct a simple survey of participants. We don't differentiate. We just want to see that you've identified how and what you'll measure. Measurements help an organisation to understand the extent to which it's achieving its outcomes and are also useful for informing program development, such as whether you need to make changes to the way you deliver a program or service to ensure that you're achieving your intended outcomes. What we've just covered are the 7 critical questions that are assessed and from which your application is scored. We and our clients read every word of your application, and it's the same for the acquittals. The important thing is not to get too lost in the weeds. Other points to be aware of are that your organisation's balance sheet does not impact funding outcomes. Also, that our approach does not fund retrospective items, gifts to a general appeal, and gifts to an individual. It's really important to apply for your organisation's greatest need. We're often asked, what should we apply for? And our response is always the same, whatever your greatest need is. The only thing we'll not put in front of our clients, apart from low scoring applications, are the 3 exclusions that I mentioned before. We speak regularly to our clients about backing quality organisations and how our assessment process works to identify strong, capable and well-governed organisations. Our clients understand that effective philanthropy involves a level of trust to enable not-for-profit organisations to ask for what they need. A few other points to consider. The word count is limited, so be concise, and also don't be afraid to use dot points. The maximum request is $120,000 per application. However, bear in mind that the average grant last year was $79,000. So the more that you apply for, the more competitive it will be to receive funding. Given that you can submit 2 applications for funding, unless you're a research institution, in which case you can submit 3, you might also like to think about diversification of projects across those 2 applications. Different types of projects have different appeal to different philanthropic interests. And, maybe one larger amount for a consideration by a larger trust and a small amount which might be considered by our many smaller trusts. Here we've got the eligibility requirements for applications submitted through the program. Please pay close attention to the ineligible items and please read through the guidelines provided on our website in detail before submitting an application. We've made some slight adjustments to the application form for the 2025 round, and you may have noted on the eligibility slide that one of those is in regard to medical research applications. For medical research projects, we now require your project to have been approved by an ethics committee before submission. This speaks to viability of your project, and we've always asked this question. Most applications do have ethics approval anyway, but we're asking for ethics to be secured ahead of the application submission. We've also added a question around board remuneration to gather data on the types of boards in the NFP sector. Finally, we've added a question on what the single biggest challenge facing the not-for-profit sector is, to gather more data around the challenges that organisations are facing and feed this back to our clients. Finally, applications open on Monday the 28th of October 2024 and close on Friday the 6th of December 2024 at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time. Please keep in mind that after this deadline has passed, we're unable to accept any applications, so give yourself plenty of time to submit, and if you're outside Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time, please diarise what the submission closing is in your time zone. Guidelines, frequently asked questions and a sample of the application form are available on our website. On behalf of Perpetual's philanthropy team, I wish you all the best with your application and we look forward to receiving it.